Greetings. We're back at it again. You're right. Don't touch that dial. You have come to the right place, Pilgrim. And this show is called Let's Be Clear. And I am Senator James Sanders Jr. Aren't you tired of fuzzy thinking? Aren't you tired of wandering generalities that you hear and you at the end of a whole conversation, you don't know if a person is for a thing, against a thing, or don't even know what they're talking about the thing. Not at this show, my friends. At this show, clarity is the most important thing that we are speaking for. We are speaking on making sure that people understand what the issues are, what the points that can be made to the issue, and we have faith that the audience will draw your own conclusion. And that's why we call our show Let's Be Clear. And I am your host, Senator James Sanders Jr. My friends, was it 24 hours ago where we were hit with a bombshell? The governor of the Empire State, yes, right, New York, has said that in 13 days from now, he will resign. Allegations have swirled around him and sexual harassment. These allegations led to a investigation by the state attorney general that deemed that these allegations had validity. The governor, of course, is firing back, but we're going to hear of those things. Here is your proposition for the night. The governor of New York should resign based on the findings of the James report, I guess we can call it, the findings of the Attorney General, Tish James. We're going to first start with a person who's going to say no to that. And that, wait, I said yes, I'm sorry. Yes, that he should resign. And to there, I am going to Erica. Erica, would you be kind enough to say the group that you belong to, and you could take 30 seconds for the group, and then why you believe that he should resign?
Sure. Thank you, Senator, so much for having me on your show. My name is Erica Vladimer. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am a co-founder of New York State's Sexual Harassment Working Group. We are a workers collective who were employed either in the New York State or New York City legislature. And we all experienced firsthand either sexual harassment, abuse, or retaliation at the hands of elected and appointed officials. We formed in 2018 after seeing the governor put forward legislation that he called the strongest protections against sexual harassment in the country. And we knew firsthand that what he was proposing was not going to protect anybody in the way that they deserve as workers, as employees, and would not have protected us in our individual situations. After those laws were passed, we decided to take matters into our own hands. And in our free time, unpaid, because we're a volunteer workers collective, we worked with experts and advocates to put together a white paper with comprehensive policy proposals. And that was followed by a series of public hearings in 2019, the first of their kind in 30 years here in New York State, focused on sexual harassment in the workplace. And these were joint legislative public hearings. They went for over 12 hours, about each. And at the end of 2019, Senator Biaggi and Senator Garrard and our former Assembly member Arabella Simotis and others really spearheaded the effort to pass the harassment-free New York legislative bill package that really helped change a lot of the protections in New York. These laws were signed by Governor Cuomo in August of 2019. He championed them alongside not the sexual harassment working group, but Time's Up, claiming that he was even strengthening the strongest laws in the nation, that he had a zero tolerance for sexual harassment, and it was time for everybody to have a dignified workplace. If you look at, and I know, Senator, you called it the James report, but I want to remind your viewers that this investigation was conducted by independent investigators, attorneys who have expertise in investigating government corruption, as well as sexual harassment in the workplace. This independent investigative report showed that the day after Governor Cuomo signed those laws and they were essentially enacted, he then sexually harassed State Trooper number 1 by putting his hands on her. Frankly, nobody who is going to abuse their power at the expense of any staffers, whether it's in New York State or in their workplace, and in this case, the executive chamber, should have the privilege, because that's what it is to hold elected office. Yeah. It is a privilege to hold elected office, and somebody who is going to traumatize and inflict harm on others, especially others on staffers, that is a power dynamic that is unacceptable and frankly flies in the face of Governor Cuomo's zero tolerance for sexual harassment. And that is why it was right for him to resign. But I do want to say, Senator, at the same time, resignation is not accountability. And that is also why the Sexual Harassment Working Group, alongside other advocacy organizations, are calling on the Assembly to continue with their impeachment process. But I do believe that he was right to resign.
Thank you. Well put as usual. But can it be said that now I'm going to be the devil's advocate in all of this, my friends. I am trying not to give my position to the end of the conversation. I do, for the sake of honest conversation, want to make sure that questions are raised. Back to you, Erica. Can it be, the governor is making statements that the report was flawed, and of course, reports usually take the name of the commission, whoever is the head of the agency. Reports usually take their name, although it is clear that these were two distinguished investigators who were brought, independent investigators who were brought on. But the governor is saying the report was flawed and a political hit job. What do you make of that?
I think when you are put in a corner and are forced to be held accountable for your actions, it is very easy to rely on tired old tropes that we all heard for so long in other positions of government, like the White House under President Trump. I will also say, though, that the report itself shows that the governor broke the law. It referred to the law and the actions that he admitted to multiple times during press conferences that were televised. And once he realized that he admitted to his actions that violated state and federal law, he then started walking it back. But if you go back and listen to when he was first asked about the allegations that were brought forth against him, he tried to use the excuse of, I didn't mean to make anybody feel uncomfortable. He never denied those actions, especially when it came to the allegations that Charlotte Bennett brought forward and then were found to be corroborated and highly credible by the independent investigators. So this is not a political hit job. Using that is just an excuse. I'm not surprised that he is doing that now that we have the report that he told the public to wait for, right? Told the public to wait for the report. You will see what the facts will show and you will be shocked. And yeah, he's right. I was shocked. I think he was more shocked, and he tried to spin it and make it his own public narrative that it was a political hit job. But the facts are clear. He broke the law.
Well, Sandy, you've heard that, and the premise of again is that the governor should resign based on the James report. Uh, who are you? What is your organization, and what is your position on this one?
Okay, I am the president of We Decide Incorporated. We are a group, a Facebook group that is pro Como. We also support due process and justice for all. I was an administrator and still am on Women for Governor Cuomo. And I'm here, and hopefully everyone will agree, representing 20 Facebook groups that are pro Cuomo, along with 70,000 members.
What do you make of this report that had just come out? What I call the James report.
I believe, and many others believe, that the report is flawed.
Okay.
I believe that the governor should be afforded due process. It's his right under the Constitution of the United States, like anyone is. That didn't happen. When he appointed, or he said he wanted AG James to investigate, he felt at that point that he was going to get a fair investigation. It appears from her conference, her briefing, that didn't happen. There are many reasons why I believe that it's not fair. One is that she talked to 179 people. She only recorded the testimony of 41 people. Why is that? Other people must have had relevant things to say, either for Governor Cuomo or against Governor Cuomo. Those should be known. Those statements should be known. At least all 41 of them. That transcript needs to be released. How possibly can Governor Cuomo be treated fairly unless the other side of the story is known? I am very pro woman. I believe that they should get out there. They should have a voice. I do believe in, as many do, in the Me Too movement, but I think the Me Too movement has gone too far. I think too many people women in particular, do not understand what the Me Too movement is all about. Getting back to Governor Cuomo, when Attorney General James came out, she said, "I believe all women." That's fine. I want to believe all women too, if they're telling the truth. If you go back, I believe that there is ulterior motives for all of this. I think it's a political hit job. If you go back and look at what Governor Cuomo has done, even over the past year and a half, he saved our lives. He stepped in during a pandemic when our leader, Donald Trump, did nothing, said nothing. He took over. He filled those shoes. If you watched his briefings, you would see people commenting from all over the world, praising him for what he did. He saved our lives.
Now, Madame, it is true that that Governor Cuomo had a statesman-like quality at that period, especially when we saw the lack thereof coming out of Washington, D.C. But among the allegations against the governor are his failures in the nursing home, the scandal that's part of the nursing home. Could it be said that the trial or his day in court that you're looking for may be satisfied in the impeachment that may happen? During the impeachment, he has the right to give his point of view. So are you in favor of that impeachment so that he can have his day in court if you wish?
If that is his only opportunity to get his day in court, then I say yes. Because I think at that point in time, the truth will come out. However, should he lose by being an impeached governor, he will never hold office again. And that would be tragic. And I think that's the alternative motive here. I think that the people are behind this, don't want him in office. He's a powerful figure, not only in New York, but in the country. He has done magnificent things for New York State. He continues to do it. He's been in politics since he was a young man. He knows how it works. I think he's a threat to many political leaders. I think he's too powerful. He's too smart. He's too well connected. And I think there are others that want his seat. Let's look at A.G. James. She has come out, and even before she came out with the report, she was out there in the Hamptons and she was having fundraisers. She is now having fundraisers to support her run for governor.
Ma'am, I don't know of her run for governor. I do know that fundraisers are part of what this political system has you do.
Right.
Until we have a type of state campaign finance, all politicians will have to raise funds to run, just for the sake of the record. Now, if you have information that I don't have, that she has been raising money to run for governor, I don't have that information.
Okay.
If you're saying it, I will assume that you have this information.
Okay. You can make that assumption.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't want to make that assumption. I'd love to know where you found that information and if you can provide that to everybody.
I would
please
certainly be glad to do that offline.
I'll come back to that point.
Go ahead.
Toward the end of this conversation, I'm going to give you an opportunity to make it online. Since you made the statement online, I'll give you the opportunity. You can take it if you wish, but I'll give you an opportunity later. But we have one more speaker on this issue that I wanted to get in here. Now, you have heard some very powerful statements, and Citizens Action is really, you're in the hot seat tonight, Rebecca. I trust that as you unmute, that you will do very well here. The resolution is Governor Cuomo should resign based on what I'm calling the James report.
Yes, thank you, Senator, for having me on. For those who don't know me, I'm Rebecca Garrard. I am the Legislative Director for Citizen Action of New York. We are a grassroots membership organization with 7 chapters and 1 affiliate throughout New York. And we fight for equitable and just policies that help all New Yorkers, not just the privileged few. And so we have a long history with Governor Cuomo. And so I think I would start by saying for us at Citizen Action, this moment of accountability was not rash and was not quick. It was, in fact, long overdue. Our relationship with the governor as an organization that uses the legislative process, right, to achieve racial equity, gender equity, worker equity, right, all the things that we truly need for a New York that works for all. Governor Cuomo, throughout that process, has shown a tendency and a willingness to really abuse his power to further his own agenda. And so these accusations and incidences, right, that have been founded that came to light were no surprise to us, but were in fact just a confirmation of someone that we've always known, right, to be someone who was willing to do anything and use his power in a way that was really abusive. So I want, definitely, he should have resigned. It's long overdue. I want to make a couple of points just in response. One, Governor Cuomo himself asked for the AG process to play out. That was his request when all of this came to light on how he thought these accusations could be handled in a just and fair manner.
Mhm.
And the reality is that when the results did not indicate what he wanted, he did what he typically does, which is to really viciously try to discredit the amazing work, often of women, to escape culpability and accountability, right? And we saw it in his reaction and his behavior towards the women who made the accusations. Look at the abuse heaped upon Lindsay Boylan after she made the accusation. So it wasn't just the abuse that she suffered during, right, the sexual harassment, but then following it, when he orchestrated a smear campaign in an attempt to discredit her. So it shouldn't be any shock to anybody that he would leverage accusations against the AG's office in an attempt to discredit those findings, because it is his go-to move and is what he always does.
Well, Rebecca, just as a point of information, according to the James report, the smear at the so-called the smear campaign was coming from Melissa DeRosa. They did not bring it to him directly. Just as an attempt to be as fair as possible.
Yes, I mean, if we don't think that Melissa DeRosa and Rich as a party are not the right and left hands of the governor, then I think we're being, slightly naive. So yes, he was not named specifically, but we know that every action that those two staffers of his take, right, are in direct coordination with him. So that's one fact I want to say, right? Going to another point, the governor absolutely should still have impeachment proceedings be conducted. I think I would totally agree with Sandy on that. This actually may be the one area where we do agree. As Erica said, resignation is not accountability. We have to know the entirety, right, of the abuse of power that existed, both in terms of the sexual harassment, but also in terms of the book deal that moved through and the work that was conducted, and whether that was volunteer, as was claimed, or was assigned in outside of accordance, right, with labor requirements. We have to get to the bottom of what happened with the nursing home deaths and the counting of those deaths. So I think we may not agree on much, but I do want to take a moment to say there is one area where Sandy and I can agree. It is enormously important that the impeachment proceedings do continue despite the resignation, which was desperately needed.
I want to add that another of the allegations that are dangling out there is the allegation over the Mario Cuomo Bridge, were safety precautions thrown to the wind in the design and build of that bridge. So Erica, you've changed your mind then. You've heard Sandy speak and you are changing your mind on these issues. Is that true?
No, I can't say that it is.
Why isn't it true? Why didn't she win you over?
Well, look, I sort of want to go back. I know,
Of course.
we had all three of us talked a little bit above and beyond resignation, and sort of went into this idea of impeachment. But I want to stick to the resignation if that's what you're looking for us to do here.
Please.
Again, the governor chose of his own volition to resign. And I would speculate that he did so because he knew that if he went through impeachment, he would be impeached. Now, Sandy, I too also believe in due process. I am a licensed attorney here in New York State. And we are, basically sworn to uphold due process. Should the governor be brought up on criminal charges for what happened with allegedly altering nursing home data, for using state resources to publish a book in the middle of the pandemic, then yes, he should be afforded his due process. And he will be afforded it probably to a level that a lot of Black and brown neighbors of mine around here are not afforded such due process. If he allowed himself to be impeached and get into the court of impeachment, he would have been afforded due process there as well. You are not afforded due process when it comes to whether or not you violated ethics laws. You're not afforded due process when you ask to the Attorney General to conduct an independent investigation, and then you don't like the results of that. You're not afforded due process when you are a powerful elected official and choose to resign instead of actually face accountability. That is very, very different. And again, I do think, and I would feel comfortable saying, I know that the governor would be afforded due process in the venues where we, as Americans, are all afforded due process. So again, I think that might also be a place that you and I can agree on, as well as the fact that he should have gone through impeachment. And I do want to, ask or talk a little bit about one other thing that you said, that you believe this is a political hit job. And I can't help but think that your assumption is that these women who came forward with their experiences of harm and trauma at the hands of Governor Cuomo are part of that political hit job. And as someone who has experienced sexual harassment, as well as sexual assault in other instances, I can tell you that victims gain nothing by coming forward, that it is a massive risk. And a lot of my co-founders of the working group talk about this as well, where one of my colleagues and friends was almost fired from her job when she was outed for the sexual harassment she experienced. It is not easy to take that hate that is spewed out by people who think that it is a politically motivated allegation. We gain nothing by making false allegations. And study after study has shown that as little, but up to maybe 2% of allegations are false, because we gain nothing by making false allegations. Nobody wants this kind of spotlight. There is no reason to want this type of scrutiny, to subject yourself to hours, 8 hours sometimes, of questioning, of things that have nothing to do with your allegations, of forcing yourself to defend the smallest actions. Nobody asked for that. And so I'm here to tell you that those 11 women were not part of a political hit job. They were speaking the truth. And they knew that the only way that we were going to be able to hold the most powerful man in New York State accountable was to speak it publicly. Because sometimes it does take one person to show everybody else that they are not alone. And I'm not so sure that you understand what the Me Too movement is about, but in this instance, what it's about is workplace dignity. And I hope you could agree with me that everybody deserves a dignified workplace and should never be subjected to harassment or discrimination.
To ask a question, if I could. You just made the statement that these women were telling the truth. You alluded to the fact that you believed what they were saying. If you hadn't, as an attorney, if you had a criminal case, you'd want to look at both sides. You would want the facts. If you do a deposition, you sit there with the other attorney and you listen to the other side, you listen to questioning. How can you be 100% sure that these women are telling the truth?
Because after interviewing almost 180 people and pouring through over almost 100,000 documents, pages of documents, the independent investigators who conducted these depositions, right, with the attorneys of the other people around them, with the witnesses could afford themselves to attorneys, the victims could afford themselves to the attorneys. Governor Cuomo had his own attorney with him. They came to the conclusion, because it was concretely corroborated, that the governor broke the law. So everything that you were saying, that it should be afforded, right? Access to certain information, that the decision makers, the decider, in your example, it'd be the judges, but in this real life instance, it was the independent investigators that Governor Cuomo asked to be appointed. Those were in this, if this were a courtroom, they were the judges, and they heard from both sides. They were provided all of that information. They took it in, they poured through all of the testimony, all of the depositions, all of the documents, and they came to the conclusion that these women were telling the truth. And based on what they told them, he broke state and federal law.
Sandy, do you want
And
to?
if I'm sorry, I'll let Sandy, but I do want to jump in too.
Go ahead. You can go ahead.
You're coming up in a second, but Sandy, you got the floor for a moment.
Okay. Why do you think, if this was a fair investigation and all the facts were looked at with no bias at all, why do you think that AG James will not release the interviews to Governor Cuomo's attorney? Could it be that there's things in there that she doesn't want them to know about? Why would you not release it? Why would you not give it
Is this
to?
a question to a person,
Vladimer?
or are you rhetorically just stating?
No, I'm asking the question based on
Okay.
her statement, is why does she think, why does she come to this conclusion when the interviews of all 41 people, the testimonies were not released?
Allow me to direct that to Rebecca, and you wanted to come in also.
Yes.
I did want to come in. Erica, though, if you wanted to answer that, feel free. I'm happy to, but.
No, please, go ahead, Rebecca.
No, I really want to. So I wanted to jump in. I'll answer that. And then I want to kind of go back a bit, right? First of all, I can't read Attorney General James's mind, right? But I'll speculate. In any investigation that's sexual in nature, I would hope that there would be some thoughtfulness around documents that maybe are sensitive in nature that would not be released. Also, I would assume that there might be some interviews that provided no substantive value add. And so there really is no point in releasing them. I'm guessing there are numerous people who were interviewed who maybe had no information that was pertinent to the investigation. And so that is not included in making your case, right? When you're bringing your case forward, it inherently is going to have evidence that supports the assertions that are being made. I mean, that's just the nature of that, right? If a prosecutor is going before a grand jury, they're not presenting every single interview that they ever conducted, including those which were neutral, right? And provided neutral information. That's not what they do. You provide the case that includes pertinent, relevant information. So that to me is just not surprising at all, right?
But you wouldn't have a problem if it was released.
Again, unless there were,
it doesn't hurt anyone.
yeah, I was going to say again, unless there are, you know, these women have experienced trauma,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, we don't know what was in some of those documents, and I'm not going to decide without seeing them that everything should be made public, right? And possibly put women in harm's way.
I'll agree. With you. Mhm.
But just to go back, and I see Erica, I know you're wanting to, but just to go back for a second too, you know, Sandy said, how can we know? How can we know 100%? And that's really what I wanted to jump in on. By nature, sexual harassment and assault happen in the darkness, right? Behind closed doors. Sandy, we're never going to know 100% anytime a woman is raped, anytime she is assaulted, and anytime she is harassed, because those things happen with two people in a room. And so there is no way to achieve 100%. All we can do is look at any documentation and interviews surrounding those moments. And if you look at what exists around these moments, it is extremely strong. These women made contemporaneous text messages. If you look at the executive assistant, whose breast was touched without consent, she immediately sent a text message saying she was shaking. This wasn't recent, right? This isn't like some part of a plan that she immediately implemented. There were text messages sent. There were immediate disclosures made. We know, right, from sexual harassment history that those are indicators of something happening, right? When those disclosures are made in the moment and those communications are made in the moment, those exist. And so if you're looking for 100%, you are never going to find it. And if that's our bar, we're never going to hold rapists accountable. We're never going to hold sexual harassers accountable. And we're never going to hold sexual assaulters accountable. So I want to just really name that, because that's not a standard we can achieve and protect women.
I'll let you respond before
Fair enough.
Sandy, since it's
Okay, fair enough. You said that, you know, you have to look at the documentation, you have to look at the interviews. Why would we not look at all of the documentation, all of the interviews? Why would we just rely on what the accuser said? And please believe me, I do not believe a woman should be sexually harassed, sexually assaulted. Absolutely not. I come from a generation where there was no law in place. Anything went in the workplace. We could have been harassed on a daily basis. There was no place for us to go. We just had to put our head down and keep working. This has come, and maybe that's why people of my age look at this a little bit differently than the younger generation. I mean, I have a daughter that's 40 years old. She looks at it entirely different, like both of you do. As soon as it hit, she said, he did it. And I said, how do you know he did it? I'm a fact finder, and I believe that we have to look at both sides in order to make a fair and just decision about whether it really happened or not. And that's my argument right now, is why did she not release?
I mean, Erica's the attorney, so I'm going to say one thing, and then I want to sort of kick it to her.
It's quick because it's going to her.
Yeah, I mean, just, for me, in a very layman's hat, right? In my layman's thinking, again, I'm going to compare this to like a grand jury, right? If a prosecutor is gathering evidence to present to a grand jury and then charges are brought, right? Then the defense has access to all the evidence. But it's not as if the prosecutor, in the process of building their case, is obligated to say, hey, as we're making the case, here's all the transcripts and everything that we've had. Once charges are brought, right, then the defense has a right to have that. So I'm assuming that if Governor Cuomo had chosen and still can choose to defend his name and assert his innocence and say, I want an impeachment, then he would be entitled to all of the evidence that's there. But no, is he entitled to it to run a PR smear campaign? Absolutely not.
Do you think he will get, if he's impeached, do you think he will get a fair trial?
I will
After
speak
since
to
March?
that. Neither of these, well, they can give their ideas. I will speak to that toward the end.
Okay,
Erica, I've stopped you. Forgive me.
No, that's okay.
sorry, I interrupted too.
No, that's okay. And I appreciate the final point that Rebecca made, because that is sort of what I've been wanting to say as well. Sandy, you've been asking, why would we not be able to look at all the documentation, all of the interviews? And frankly, as the public, we don't have a right to those. There is certainly a level of sensitivity, as Rebecca broke down, but we are not, the quote unquote defense here. We are not Governor Cuomo. We are not his attorneys. And as Rebecca said, had he afforded himself the opportunity to clear his name or defend himself in a court of impeachment, he would have been afforded those documentations. We know that the Assembly Judiciary Committee is currently being afforded the opportunity to look at that documentation. So I have to assume that Governor Cuomo would have been able to look at all of those as well. But we as the public, we don't, that is not within our purview or our privilege, frankly. We don't, and it's not on us to come to a decision as to whether or not he is impeached or should resign. We will certainly advocate for what we believe in, but again, it is up to the investigators to decide if this, going back to the metaphor of being in court, we would be playing the same role of sitting in the audience of the court. And if we wanted to look at evidence, we really wouldn't be able to. We might be able to get the transcript of what was happening in court and, the examinations and the cross-examinations. We'd also have to pay for those. But that is not our right here. What we can do is look at what the independent investigators collected and put together, which again was 68 pages, something like that. And after conducting interviews, extensive interviews with over 170 people and almost 100,000 pages of documents, they came to the conclusion that Governor Cuomo broke the law. And I also want to say, I am very sorry, Sandy, that when you were working and you were younger, you didn't have laws in place. That's, excuse my language, pretty fucked up.
Yeah, it is.
And that it was not right. It was not just. I have to say, though, that even though we have the laws in place right now, what I think we see playing out, especially with Governor Cuomo, but what we've been seeing play out even before what we're seeing with Governor Cuomo, having laws on the books doesn't actually help if we don't hold people accountable for breaking those laws.
I just think that AG James, when she came out and she revealed the contents of her investigation, that she became investigator, prosecutor, and juror, that there was no place for anyone to go, that she had set in stone the conclusion that Governor Cuomo had sexually harassed these women.
But it was said, it was because what she was doing was relaying information that independent investigators had already done and put in a comprehensive report. She didn't play a role in that. There's a reason why she brought in outside counsel and deputized them so that it would be truly independent. It was about as independent as we could have possibly gotten. It was as independent as we, the sexual harassment working group, were looking for. It was the appropriate way to do it that is called for in New York state law. Meanwhile, we had to force Governor Cuomo through the court of public opinion, frankly, to even get there because he didn't want that in the first place. He tried to get the chief judge.
Allow me to take your point. Sandy, let's delve into this to see where the breakdown happened as you believe. Do you believe that the investigators were fair? That the two investigators were fair?
I do not believe they were fair. They eliminated evidence. You cannot have a true, fair, thorough investigation by eliminating evidence. And I believe that that's what they did. They didn't investigate or look more thoroughly into the fact that Brittany Camiso said originally that the harassment on her happened on November 16th.
Wrong. I'm sorry. I have to stop you there because that's false, and that is false information.
Okay.
If you look at the report itself says that she said to them while being deposed that she didn't know the exact date. It happened close in time to when she had to do some type of take a photo for her job. And that photo was taken on November 16th. It is even in the original Times Union report that she didn't remember the exact day. I know that Governor Cuomo's attorney said publicly that it happened on the 16th and tried to discredit based on that. She never claimed it took place on the 16th.
Okay, when they went back to records, and I'm sure the governor's office keeps very thorough records on where their employees are, how long, and what they're doing. The only day that Ms. Camiso was at the governor's mansion was on the 16th of November. She then said, well, recently, maybe it was November 25th. All I know is it was cold outside. Now, if I had been so traumatized to be in an office with my superior who sexually harassed me, I would surely remember the time, the date, because I was so traumatized.
But Sandy, just to say, some people, and I'm sure you would, but some people may be mentally trying to put it out of their minds. Some people may be trying to not remember any of these things. So it's conceivable, it's conceivable.
Okay, I wouldn't argue that. It's possible that she went into some kind of shock.
Okay.
But then afterwards.
Yeah, I would just interrupt to say, like Erica, having been sexually harassed and sexually assaulted, I can remember every vivid detail of both, but I could not tell you the date. That is not a detail that stays with me. Many others, unfortunately, do, not that one.
I'm horrified to hear your story, this part of it, Rebecca, as with Erica, but I'm sorry, my soul responding. Sandy, you were saying something, please.
Okay. The other thing that I understand is that after she was sexually harassed by the governor, and I'm talking about Brittany Camiso, she then went over to the sofa and sat with the governor and did a selfie with him. And that's where he supposedly rubbed her butt. The picture of the two of them together, I have to question whether she was as traumatized as she claims she was and as harassed or assaulted as she says. She looks pretty happy in that picture. She seems pretty content in that picture. I don't know that I could fake it if I had been traumatized a minute or two before that and sit next to the man that had done that to me.
Sandy, will you?
Sandy,
I've had family members who have been assaulted, and they look back on their actions and wonder why they did, why they didn't. Everybody's going to react in a different way. And what may seem logical to us or whatever,
Right.
you know, folk can say they didn't know what to do, and they just wanted out or whatever. So it's conceivable, Sandy. It's conceivable.
Sandy, I will also say that what you are portraying is the fallacy of a perfect victim. And the fact is that there is no such thing as a perfect victim. And look, I've played Monday morning quarterback as well. I've played it with myself.
Sure.
I ask myself every time I think about what happened with former Senator Jeff Klein, why did I stay there and finish my cigarette? Why? I didn't have to. I could have thrown it in the street and walked away, but I didn't. I stood there and I finished my cigarette. Couldn't tell you why, but that is used against me to this day. There's no such thing as a perfect victim. And if we try and fit victims in this box, we are essentially taking away their humanity from them, even more than it already was by the person who harmed them. Humans make mistakes, and they're not going to react in the perfect way that we as outsiders would expect them to. And I promise you, one of the reasons why it was so hard for me to come to terms with the fact that I was sexually harassed was because I had stood up for coworkers months before that and reported sexual harassment on their behalf. I am proud and maybe a little cocky enough to say that I don't take shit. I refuse to. I will call things out. And in that moment, when Senator Klein shoved his tongue in my mouth, I froze. And I didn't act or react the way that I thought I would in the situation. I didn't act or react in the way that I would have if it was a friend who told me. And I would have gone and reported immediately on their behalf. And I will live with that every day. I have to live with that. We don't act the way that we think we can in times of trauma. And that's what's most important, is that these are traumatizing experiences. And to think that we can act logically in a way to continue to call things out, we're just trying to protect ourselves. And frankly, when it comes to working in government, we're trying to protect our ability to continue in public service. I loved my job. I loved working in the New York State Senate. I obviously didn't like who I worked for, but I loved being able to sit at those budget negotiation tables and getting to help craft education policy. And I wanted to try and continue to do that. And eventually came to the conclusion that at that point I had to leave. But we also know that Brittany is still employed there. And she has her own reasons, but there are people who choose to continue working in those spaces because they love their job. And if they leave public service, getting your foot back in the door that is essentially controlled by Governor Cuomo is never going to happen. And so they'd rather swallow the trauma and plaster that smile on for that selfie to make sure that they don't face any retaliation at the hands of their abusers.
Well, my friends, we're reaching the end of a very enlightening conversation, my friends. I mean,
My heart breaks for both of you that
Yeah.
you are victims to that extent.
I join you in that prayer.
Yes,
And,
yes,
that we
absolutely.
that we and that we figure this world out around us and end oppression of every type. We need to end oppression of every type.
Absolutely.
Let's start with women. I want this stuff to be ended so much. We can start with women.
Certainly racism needs to be,
I
would definitely say racism needs to be a huge priority too. I always say
no,
too,
oh, don't
I'm
get
sure
me
you
wrong.
do. I just want to name that I have not lost sight of
I
that.
assure you, I don't
did
want
not
that
totally
out.
lost sight of it, but I wanted to name that I
But
haven't.
okay,
And I do want to name, I
I-
do really want to name that Erica and I, as white women, also don't experience, I mean, the level of trauma that women of color experience at the intersection of racism and patriarchy and misogyny is truly the most difficult place to exist. So that should really be noted as well.
I feel very honored that I was on this with both of you. And you also, Senator, if there's some way that we can work together for women and women's rights, I am right there behind you. Even though I have a different point of view on Cuomo, know that I am a woman that supports women and will do anything I can, especially in the workplace.
If one thing we do in this show is to grow, if we all can grow and encourage the audience to think and grow, I mean, if we've succeeded in that, then we've done something good. Now we're going to give our closing remarks here. Rebecca, you were last, so you'll go first. And Erica, you'll go last. Since you were first, I believe I'm losing count here somewhere. If I do it wrong, it's because I couldn't keep up with the count. Rebecca, all yours.
Okay, and I'll try to be quick because I don't want to take time away from others. Thank you again, Senator, for having us on. This was a conversation that was extremely necessary. My hope, I think I want to end on what my hope is moving forward. One is that we have an executive branch and chamber represented by soon-to-be Governor Hochul that is run through a lens of justice and equity, which is something that we have not had for a very long time. And the other is that we don't view this situation as an isolated one. It is perhaps the most obvious example of a systemic problem where men in power exert that in a really abusive way. And for that to change, what we need is their inner circle to not protect that and to call it out. And so for us to really have a culture shift, those are the dynamics and the ecosystems that we need to create. And so I'm gonna choose to sit in a place of hope in this moment and look for that as we move forward.
Keep hope alive. Sandra, would you be kind enough?
Yes, I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. I'm hoping that everyone out there, whether it's New Yorkers, nationally, around the world, that they remember Governor Cuomo, that in history, he be remembered for the wonderful things he did, the magnificent things he did. Did he make a mistake? I believe he did. But I think he did wonderful things for people in this country during the pandemic. The things that he's put in place for New Yorkers, the hope that he has given us that we're in crisis right now, that he's going to turn things around. What will happen now, I don't know. He did a lot for women's rights. He put marriage equality in place. all these things need to be remembered. He is the governor. You know, he had a statement and, you know, he said, goodness wins and love wins.
Mm.
And you know what? I hope he's remembered for the goodness that he has done and the love that he has shown for New Yorkers and for the state of New York. That's what I hope his legacy is.
Well put. I trust you were finished.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
I'm fine.
Okay, Erica.
I hope that all of your viewers recognize that the successes that New York State was able to claim under Governor Cuomo, in spite of Governor Cuomo, could have also come about without sacrificing the dignity and humanity of his employees. He was a governor who loved the public spotlight, and nothing more. And while he portrayed himself as somebody who loved New York State, behind the scenes, those of us who step away from our computers and actually go up and work with legislators know that so much of what we achieved was in spite of Governor Cuomo, in spite of his power abuse. That while he was sitting and talking about trying to protect New Yorkers during COVID, people like Rebecca and I, and organizations like Make the Road, were fighting to make sure he didn't cut billions of dollars of Medicaid. He was doing that behind the scenes, and he could because of the power that he abused. New York is a great state, and we will continue to be a great state without Cuomo. And I am grateful that we were able to have one of the most independent investigations to hold him accountable. I am sad to see that he will not follow through and has chosen to disparage and continue to harm and talk down on his victims publicly. He is not worthy of the office he occupies. And frankly, he should have been gone by midnight yesterday. It is unacceptable that he is still there. But like Rebecca said, he is just one example of a system that needs to be dismantled. We know that there are more power abusers and sexual harassers who sit in office right now. And if we don't change more laws, if we don't see institutional courage from our elected officials, including incoming Governor Kathy Hochul, then this is just going to be another blip on the radar that we look back on when the next serial harasser and abuser is called to account and say, what didn't we do right last time? I hope we don't have to do that. And I will continue to fight alongside the Sexual Harassment Working Group and every other organization that's fighting to make sure that we don't have to say that next year, next month, or in years to come.
I thank you all for your positions. You have used them well and raised very worthy points. I was far more into the conversation than I thought I would, and my heart was certainly taking me different places. From Lord Acton. Lord Acton said, "Power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely." We do need in anything, not simply this, checks and balances. The power of democracy has to be checks and balances. I would argue that the New York Constitution is wrong by making the governor too strong. We need to change the Constitution. It kind of lends itself to a powerful, all-powerful governor, but I guess that's a conversation for another day. In full disclosure, just in full disclosure, my public record is that I am not the greatest fan of Governor Cuomo and have not been. That I was one of the voices who called for his resignation before the James report. However, as a historian, I do want to say, and I've said this to him, that he must go down in history as the greatest builder of New York State. He had outbuilt Robert Moses, who was a racist. Let me be kind. He outbuilt Robert Moses in terms of public building. And as a historian, I just love to state what the history says. Now, as a senator, if this process continues, sooner or later, it ends at the Senate. And I will have to let go of my belief system, if you wish, and listen, because I have to give him the trial that I would want if I was sitting in that position. And I would have to be listening for the sound of truth, beyond a doubt, all of these concepts that we would have to do as fair as possible. And I can assure you, Sandy, as I assure everybody here, that I will struggle to hear what his defense will come up with. That he will be given, you're right, he will be given far fairer a trial than Black and brown, the women, that he will be given far fairer a trial than perhaps half the people in any prison that you take.
Right.
That my colleagues, they once they settle down to the idea that they have a duty to the Constitution and humanity to deal fairly with this person, I have the belief that most of them will operate on the highest level of integrity that you're ever going to find. In fact, I would want any jury to be composed of such. They're going to operate on that level of integrity. So I know that I certainly will, if, and I suspect that it will, my friends. I suspect that this is going for impeachment. But if this goes there, then New York should have faith that we will multiply the 11 brave souls in the jury box. But let me end by saying that all of us can agree that we commend the 11 brave women who stepped forward on this issue, that we commend women in general, or any victim of any type, that to step forward and say, you know what, I'm not going to accept oppression silently. I am not going to accept injustice, exploitation silently, that we must fight for the beloved community that we're looking for, a community that stands against racism, that stands against misogyny, that understands that women make up half the world, half the sky, that we cannot, that any person born of a woman, especially men, if you're born of a woman, how can you accept injustice against women and not say something and stand forward. You can't do it if you want to call yourself a man, whatever that means in this day and age. But it should mean that we stand against injustice. I don't know what it does mean, but it should mean that we stand against injustice. That should be a foundation of all of this. But the same thing can be said for women. We all need to stand against every injustice we see. So I commend you, Eric, and I commend you, Rebecca, and I commend you, Sandy, for an unfair struggle that you have that's been forced on you. And all I can do is try to learn from you more, so I can be a better ally, and that I will try to do. I will try to learn from you more so that I can aid you in that struggle, because it's my struggle too. All of these struggles lead to the same place. The intersectionality is there. It leads. You can't beat one of these things and leave the others. It's a danger to the whole thing. It will only draw back and back to the same. You're gonna have to beat all of these things if we want to get to that beloved place that Martin Luther King, the Reverend Doctor, and other people spoke of, as flawed as all of them were. The idea of justice is not flawed, and it's one that we should live for and give our lives for if we have to. But let's get there, my friends. Let's get there. Having said that, I want to thank you again, the women who have been kind enough to struggle with me and on this issue. Thank you. And to the audience, really take this to heart, my friends. Whatever position you have, why don't you try to open your mind and learn from the others?
Right.
How about that? Why don't you, whatever position you came with, why don't you make it a real point of hearing the others so that we can get to someplace? This is the station, promoting myself. This is the podcast that we have called Let's Be Clear, and we have been clear. We have been clear this evening, and I'm sending it to James Sanders. And on behalf of myself and on behalf of everybody seeking the truth, thank you to all of you who have come, and especially to my guests this evening. God bless you all.
Thank you. Same to you.
Take care now.